Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I'm the host, as always. Joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Chargers fans, how are you doing? Did you like the title of our last video? If you didn't, hey, you might like this one. This is a fun one.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. This is definitely going to be more of an optimistic side of things, which is why we wanted to do it the way that we did. If you watched the video beyond the first 5 minutes yesterday, you understood why we wanted to do it this way. So it'll make all the sense in the world at the end of the episode today when we kind of outline why the Chargers could overachieve in 2024. And technically speaking, both of us have them do overachieving in 2024. But we'll dive into that in a second. So it should be a lot of fun. Before we dive into the actual show, there were some super chats that we missed yesterday, and that's my bad. I totally forgot about those. I thought that, we got to the end of the show and I was like, okay, I'm going to hit on the super chats. And then we just kind of ended. So first and foremost, Ivan Sabarius, I don't know if he's in the chat yet. I assume he'll be watching the video later. He wanted to know how concerned we were about Alt and McConkey still needing to sign their contracts because he has PTSD from Joey Bosa's holdout back in the day in 2016.
I am negative worried, whatever you want to call it. Yes, of course, it'd be nice for them to get their contracts, and you're hoping that they don't have like a Fowler situation with the Jaguars, where I believe he tore his ACL before he even signed his initial rookie contract with the Jaguars back in the day. They still gave him one. Yeah. That's rough, right? So, knock on wood. Overachieving episode. It's a positive one. I'm not worried. I'm not particularly worried.
Yeah, no, the current CBA basically makes it impossible for these rookies to hold out. Essentially, what happens in these kind of negotiations with the early round draft picks is you're talking about guarantees, you're talking about signing bonuses, things like that. The actual structure and meat and bones of the contracts are all set out by the collective bargaining agreement. So there's really just haggling over specific details within the contract. But like Tyler said, they're going to sign. It's just a matter of when. I believe Rashawn Slater did not sign his contract until after or before the official mini camp. So his took into June. It is what it is sometimes, but at the end of the day, these contracts will get signed. It's just kind of a matter of when. Okay, the other ones, we got a few from NSN. Appreciate NSN as always jumping in here. The first one that he sent says the DB room is rather scary to go into the 2024 season. We've kind of hinted at the depth. It's one of the things we talked about yesterday. Obviously, to me, if there is a position where I want the Chargers to spend one of their last roster spots, it is at safety. It seems like that market could be getting going a bit here post-draft with Jamal Adams and I believe Justin Simmons having visits scheduled in the next couple of weeks, if not this week. So maybe a Quandre Diggs type, or who knows, maybe an Adrian Phillips reunion if we want to keep that train going. I do think that the Chargers need a third safety. I think that's also why we projected, one of the safety UDFAs to make the roster, because the safety room is just kind of not great right now.
Yeah, we talked about there being potentially two spots for one of these undrafted free agents safeties to make the roster. I don't like people keep asking for Simmons or some of these other top tier guys. Obviously, that'd be a ton of fun. I just don't see why anyone who believes they're a starter, who can get starter money, would go, let's go be the third guy with the Chargers. So we'll see. Honestly, I'll take a Dean Marlowe type. I'll take I'm forgetting the other safety's name. I'll take anybody who's at least some veteran experience, who can at least be a dependable third body should they need them. They don't even have that right now. So people are hoping for Simmons. I'll take a D Marlowe type.
Yeah, I think Simmons is probably still holding out hope that he can get paid like a decently high contract. Different positions, right? But DeAndre Hopkins signed with the Titans in like June, and he still got a pretty high wide receiver contract. And same thing with Odell with the Ravens. So I think Simmons, it would be amazing. He's one of the best players in the league, but I think that's why he's going to hold out until he gets the offer that he wants. I also think he's probably going to go to a contender, and we'll kind of see what happens there. But There still are some pretty good safeties out there. That's probably the position that I think you can still get an impact rotational safety, rotational role player at more so than the other ones. Okay, last two from NSN were just kind of more comments. He said he appreciated the work in digging up the wide receiver opponents. That was obviously something we did on yesterday's show. And then he believes that the Justin Herbert deserves a better wide receiver room than the one that the Chargers have currently given him.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can't look at this wide receiver room and go, that's an elite room. Even if you feel good about it or okay about it, you can't sit here and say like that's the best possible room for him. So they can win. I'm going to talk about how they can overachieve today. But yeah, eventually you'd like to see more talent in this room.
Yeah. But it is the first year of a potential rebuild. Next year you could still draft another wide receiver. Josh Palmer is a free agent. We'll see about Quentin Johnson. Obviously, DJ Chark is not around long term. So with the way that the draft works, and Joe Ortiz has kind of hinted at this, there's a deep class every single year. Even last year's class, which nobody really liked, it had really good depth to it. And obviously, Puka Nacua is probably the outlier of all outliers. But Tank Dell in the third round, etc. Guys are just kind of popping up left and right these days, where you can find real value on day 2 of the draft in the wide receiver market. So I think that's kind of where the Chargers are probably going to be living under Joe Ortiz going forward.
Yeah, and they can definitely be successful there. It doesn't require first round selection every other year. Just keep adding. And I think there will definitely be some turnover heading into next year.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Appreciate those super chats from yesterday. Apologies for not getting into them to finish the show last night, but wanted to make sure and touch on them today. People asking about some of the OTA takeaways. We are going to touch on some of them. Not this week. There's not been a ton. The media was not there today, for example, so we don't really kind of know what happened. So we're going to do our OTA coverage in the way that we've done past, where we kind of wait until the whole process is kind of finished, and then we'll discuss some broader takeaways at that time. All right, before we get into today's show about the Chargers potentially overachieving in 2024, of course, you guys know how it goes. Have to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, golf, esports, whatever the case may be, Prize Picks has it all, and it is super easy to use, and it's a great way to line your pockets with some money while supporting the show. So you can go to prizepicks.com/guilty to get a deposit match up to $100 with the code GUILTY at checkout. Again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty, which is a great way to support the show. All right, let's dive in here. Again, the Vegas win total is kind of our baseline here. Vegas has the Chargers at 8.5. Yesterday, we hit why the Chargers could come in under that number. Today, we're going to hit why they could come in over that number. And should be a lot of fun today. And hopefully, appease the crowd that thinks that we're too negative.
Never. We didn't predict 14 wins, so we'll see. But no, listen, you and I, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's in the middle, but we got to tell it like it is as best we can. Look through everything. This channel tries to pride itself on being even, so we'll give it to evenly. Yesterday was underachieved, today's overachieve, and of course we got to start with, and rightfully so, Steven had this one first. Justin Herbert is healthy. As far as we're aware, he's healthy. And when he's healthy, the Chargers are going to be at least good. And when he's not on the field, like he literally misses a game and everyone gets fired. Like that's what happens when Justin Herbert misses time. We've been grateful, obviously, to have Phillip Rivers before him, but now it's Justin Herbert. And when he's healthy, and when he was healthy last year, he was outstanding. And we really got to see this offense. Week 1 was a bit more of a run game approach. Week 2, they were still trying to find things in the passing game. By the time we got to week 3, when Mike Williams was still out there and Corey Lindsey was still out there, they were outstanding. I mean, Flores was a head coaching candidate this past offseason. He was someone who took basically nobody on that Minnesota defense and turned them into anything half decent, which was impressive. And they had no answer for Justin Herbert. And you and I think, agree at this point, it's his best game that we've seen because they threw everything at him. They blitzed him every which way possible. And him, Keenan Allen, unstoppable. So over those first 3 games, you can look at it any which way. People on YouTube, you can see the screen here. Yards, touchdowns, interceptions, big time throw rate, turnover worthy play rate, first downs, adjusted completion percentage, passer rating. EPA per play and CPOE, completion percentage over expected. Top 5 in almost every category there, at least at minimum, top 8 in all these categories. To start the year, in year 1 of that offense, he was outstanding. And so when he's healthy, the Chargers will be good. And, 8.5 wins, I'm sure the projection, I'm sure, bakes in some of, Herbert being, good this year, being healthy this year. But he gives you a chance. He's a great quarterback, top 5 quarterback easily. Justin Herbert, especially with the schedule, can take you over 8.5 wins.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight here the specific stretch of the first 3 games last year, because obviously it was when he was healthy, the supporting cast was healthy. And I think when I look back on like everything that Justin Herbert has done, every stretch of games that he has played, if you give me a 3-game stretch of his career and said pick the best stretch of him individually, I think it's the first 3 games of last season. I do. Like, I think the offense and the offensive line and the protection plans had some really poor moments in the first game against the Dolphins and the second game against the Tennessee Titans, and that's what cost them those games. And also the third game, where they almost lost too. Like, it's kind of crazy to look back and think, for me to say the first 3 games of last season were Justin Herbert's best 3-game stretches of his career, and they almost went 0-3. But it really is true. Like, I wanted to go back and watch the tape of his first 3 games, and he was just in such an incredibly high level performance zone. Like, everything that you wanted in terms of a off platform standpoint, in terms of a creativity standpoint. Obviously he had that touchdown to Keenan Allen against the Tennessee Titans where he had Jeffrey Simmons literally hit him in the face, and then he rolled out and hit Keenan with a laser. And then some of the things he did against the Vikings that you mentioned, his best came for me. That's the version of Justin Herbert I expect we will see in terms of the creativity, the playmaking ability, the aggressiveness. Like, I think it was a really underrated storyline of last season because the Chargers were bad and people kind of stopped talking about them. But Justin Herbert's average depth of target last year was the highest it's ever been in his career. He was much more aggressive downfield. His big time throw percentage was much higher because he was really trying to take those shots downfield. And I think part of it was also like him realizing like, hey, I kind of have to like put the team on my back to win these games. But I think the overall like volume stats are not going to be there, but just in terms of the aggressive, efficient, explosive playmaker, I think that's the version of Justin Herbert that we're going to get. And I think that guy in 2024 can be in the MVP picture. And then in 2025, when the Chargers are better, he can be a legitimate like MVP contender. Justin Herbert has that. Of course, I'm on a Chargers channel talking to Chargers fans. You guys all believe that. But I just was so impressed with the first 3 games last year that when we decided to do this, I wanted to highlight those games because I think it was truly the best 3-game stretch of his career. And across the board, he was incredible. And like, yeah, you could nitpick and say like, oh, like you needed to identify the splits or whatever like that. But like you just said, it was the first year of the offense. There were a lot of moving parts in terms of protection plans. So I think this was the right place to start because Justin Herbert is the gem of the Chargers, and they're going to go as far as he takes them on offense. But he's capable of it, man. I do really believe that he can be a legitimate MVP candidate this season as long as the Chargers can kind of do him some favors and stay competitive.
Yeah, the game against the Vikings, his only bad throw was a touchdown. Like, that's how just, luck, whatever you want to call it, like, that's how good he was to start the season. And how good he was in that game, as Isabel points out, Vikings, Packers, Lions, some of his best games, outstanding games. And he was 1-2, and they barely hung on to that Vikings one. Gabriel points out, is it asking too much for Herbert to just be rewarded when he plays at a high level? Like, can they actually just win? And we'll definitely get into that. But you're now going to see this team, like Herbert's going to be healthy. He'll play within structure, out of structure, be creative, take chances, yet be smart at the same time. I think this coaching philosophy, the offensive line, Greg Roman, like it's all going to fit very, very well. So I think he'll be his best efficient self, even if it's not, 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns like AI likes to predict.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to get the 2021 season where he threw for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns, which, again, nobody really talks about. Like, people still think his rookie season was his best overall season. I'm like, y'all gotta watch 2021 back because it was not even close in my opinion. But I can't wait to watch this guy play football again, man. Like, the ball placement and some of these throws that he had in the first 3 games when he was fully healthy were insane. I love watching like the defensive back linebackers reactions to what the quarterback does. And there's a throw to Mike Williams where Byron Murphy is covering him, and he literally is like on the ground, and he's like throws his hands up. He's like, "What do you want me to do?" And then there's a touchdown to Donald Parham in the first game. It was in the red zone, like at the 1 yard line, where he like faked and then like threw it over the top, and it was just a bullet. And obviously Donald Parham is 6'8", but the safety like turned over to the side, and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Like, I was in position, and so it's just like, I love watching the reactions of that because the ability that Justin has to just like pin the football exactly where he wants to put it is so good. I think he's gonna squash a lot of doubters because the Chargers are gonna be, I think, a better football team around him. And then 2025, man, I think really like that's when we'll see Justin start to get, rightfully recognized the way that he should be.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for that for sure.
All right. The pass rush to me was second on my list of why the Chargers could overachieve. And we kind of went on this after the Chargers signed Bud Dupree. But you look at this list, and we'll talk about the stats from last season from this pass rush group. And it's really kind of insane. Like, I was typing it up, and I'm just like, man, this is kind of crazy to look at. Like, there's not many teams out there, and Jesse Minter himself talked about it when they just had Mac, Bosa, and Thule. He's like, hey man, like, not many teams have these kind of edge rushers, and they added Bud Dupree. So I'll kind of talk about the numbers, and then Tyler, you can kind of give your thoughts about how this could all like, gel together here. So just to recap from 2023, Khalil Mack obviously had one of his best seasons of his career, 88 pressures, 18 sacks, 11 hits, which was more than his Defensive Player of the Year campaign. All 3 of those numbers, fun fact. He had a 10.4 pass rush productivity rating, an 18.2 win percentage, 27.1 in true pass hits, which was second in the league behind Myles Garrett, by the way. Joey Bosa, limited action, injuries, all that. 24 pressures, 7 sacks, 3 hits, a 7.9 pass rush productivity rating, 16.2 win percentage, 25.7 in true pass hits, which I think was 12th, if I'm not mistaken. Still very, very good. Thule, the rookie, had 51 pressures, 8 sacks. That number is different because PFF does not share sacks like the rest of the crew, which I think is the right approach. 7 hits, 6.9 PRP, 11.9 win percentage, 14.3 against true pass hits. Bud Dupree had 38 pressures, 8 sacks, 2 hits, 5.6 PRP, 6.6 win percentage, 10.4 in true pass hits. And then Morgan Fox, kind of the unsung hero of the group, 37 pressures, 5 sacks, 6 hits, 7.0 PRP, 13.2 win percentage, 17.8 true pass set percentage. All 3 of those numbers for Morgan Fox were top 10 in the league among interior defensive linemen. So the numbers are kind of crazy when you see them pop on screen like this. So Tyler, what are your thoughts about how this group can kind of gel together and what ultimately it could lead to for the Chargers as a team?
Well, the great thing is, other than Dupree, who is a veteran, like, they've all been together. They know how to play off each other. I talked to Morgan Fox before last season about, why they were so much better down the stretch. And he just said they know each other. They know how to rush together. They get their tendencies, how to rush together. And sure, the scheme will be different. Verbiage may be different. Concepts may be different, but they get each other. They have their own natural chemistry. When you watch film, or even if you're just watching games, and I remember watching, Joey and Khalil, they're out there. Great. Cool. Or Ingram and Joey, whatever it's been. The first 2 out there are always great. And then you see the second unit jump on when the guys need a breather. And it's like, all right, pray somebody else gets a pressure. Pray, it's Fackrell Rumpf, let's say. And it's like, yeah, all right, cool. Maybe they got a pressure. Like, I don't have a lot of expectations. They're the second unit. Fine. I don't remember ever. We talked about this. I don't remember seeing anything like this, where the third edge rusher is Thule and the fourth guy is Dupree. I mean, again, 89 pressures last year from your edge 3 and 4. That's just unheard of. And I don't know if Minter knows what to do with this group, because you can deploy all 4 of them or all 5 of these guys, or 2 inside and 2 out, like whatever you want to do. I'm so curious how they decide to do that, because they rush, or Minter would rush like Braden McGregor, the edge rusher from Michigan last year, a bit inside. But it's not like he's not one of these guys. He's not Thule. He's not Joey, Khalil Mack, etc. So I'm so fascinated by what they're going to do. I don't even have like a good statistical comparison here because as we talked about with the Ravens, like they didn't have all three guys on the field once last season, let alone these four guys. So to me, it's just a relentless pass rush. And I think that we're going to see the DBs, maybe even especially Asante Samuel Jr., just play better because the rush is so much better. Maybe we're putting, not enough faith in this rush doing so much for the DBs that the DBs just play better because of like a trickle down sort of effect there. So obviously still worried about the DB group, but this pass rush is going to be something that we've never seen. We've seen 2 great edge rushers, maybe 3. I don't think we've seen a group of 4 this good before. So, and then Morgan Fox, of course, like and I'm glad you said it this way on social media. The regime just decided to not play him. And I really don't know why. And nobody really knows why. I understand if you don't need to play him on early downs, fine. But they were trying to play Scott Matlack over someone who was just like twice as good, 3 times as good in all the per play stats. I never understood that. If Minter says, hey, whoops, that's their problem, let's get you out there. Morgan Fox is like a top 10 defensive tackle in terms of rushing the passer. So you got 5 guys who can absolutely crush it rushing the passer. It's going to be nasty. This is the best group of any group the Chargers have on their team by a long shot, because you can say, maybe the 2 tackles are better than the 2 edge rushers, but the 3rd and 4th guys certainly aren't Thule and Bud Dupree.
Yeah. If you took Thule out of it, that's probably the equivalent for the tackles, I would say. Dupree and Trey are probably on the same level at this point in their careers. But yeah, man, I think, this is a good point from Gabriel. This is probably a big reason why, Mack, Bosa, and Fox all decided to stick around this year. Obviously, Fox, his contract wasn't necessarily up for reworking, and it still hasn't been touched. But they wanted to stay together. And Khalil and Joey talked last season about like unfinished business, and then Joey was hurt again, which hopefully that trend turns around this year. But I think the kind of like theme of the offseason of this slideshow is raising the floor. And, Justin Herbert does that. Obviously, I think we'll get to the coordinators here in a second. But the best way to raise your floor as a defense is to go after your pass rush. And I think there were just more resources out there for them to focus in on the pass rush. I mean, this is, there's no real like Bud Dupree at cornerback at this point in time. There's no real way for you to keep Joey Bosa around that level of corner when healthy. It's not out there, And so I think the Chargers really leaned into a strength here. And I look at like what the Jets have been able to have and like what the 49ers have been able to have at certain points of the season, where if you get to 3rd down and long against the Chargers, the amount of ways that Jesse Minter can just wreak havoc against your offensive line, it's going to be a nightmare for opposing coaches to block this quartet, and then you add in Morgan Fox. And so it's just, the possibilities are endless here. Like we saw just like Thule, Khalil, and Morgan like have field days against bad offensive lines. Now, if Joey can stay healthy, now you add Bud Dupree in there as well. That's scary, man, for these offensive lines, where all these offensive lines have major issues, major depth issues. So this group can just destroy things for them. And that is a key thing that I think Jesse Minter brings to the table here. We'll get to in a second, but it just raises the floor. Like, yeah, you have concerns at cornerback, you have concerns at safety. It doesn't matter if you have pressure coming in your grill as a quarterback in 2 seconds, So I think that's the main reason why the Chargers wanted to continue to add to the pass rush, is like, a guy like Bud Dupree is still out there. We have the resources for it. And let's just make a strength stronger. Let's keep a rotation. Let's keep everybody fresh. And let's just get after it. So I loved the approach with it, even though Bud Dupree is not like a great player. But hey, man, as your edge 4, a guy like Bud Dupree, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, that's... I can't even imagine what Jesse Minter is thinking with these 4 guys. I mean, listen, let's say Mack and Bosa go down. Hope they don't. Like Thule Dupree, that's better than some teams 1 and 2 and their edge rushers. Thule genuinely, if he started the year as a starter and played the entire season as a starter, was like Will Anderson defensive player of the year type potential there in terms of his numbers. Maybe fell off a bit, I guess, but like he was on his way. The fact that that's the third guy is ridiculous.
Yeah, the Patriots are starting Keon White and Josh Uche on the edge. That's not exactly great.
I think Tuli had more pressures than both combined.
Yeah. Some of this is a little bit unfair, but like the Colts drafted Leatu Latu, but until they did that, they were starting Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam. Like it's rough. The Chiefs, George Karlaftis and Mike Dana. I don't know, man.
That group was okay. That group was pretty
they're
good.
Fine. The Commanders are starting Dorrance Armstrong and Cleveland Farrell
yes.
this year. So
okay,
some of these rooms are rough, man.
That's the one. There you go.
So yeah, man, I just can't wait to see what it looks like. And obviously Joey's health is key there. The narratives around him online, I think, are continually just ridiculous to me. The guy works his ass off to stay healthy, and unfortunately it just hasn't happened yet. But if the Chargers can really just focus in on him being, that efficient, like 30 to 40 snaps per game kind of role, and just kind of turn him into a mercenary here, because Tuli and Bud Dupree can play the run. Like, you don't have to have Joey play that many snaps. And it's just, I think they'll be able to keep him fresh. Obviously, we believe in Ben Herbert, who is featured in the thumbnail today, to keep these guys healthy. But we'll ultimately see what happens. And that's going to be a topic later on down the road here in a minute.
Yep.
All right. We'll get to the next one here. The coordinator is bringing a higher floor. Again, this is kind of a theme of the day, if you will. I wanted to bring this up because, I think I've come around on the Greg Roman hire more so than a lot of people out there on social media. The floor aspect of things, it obviously starts with the run game. And, he has coordinated 5 top 5 run games in terms of consensus EPA per rush and success rate in his career, including the consensus number 1 attack twice, the Buffalo Bills in 2016, which was not a great roster at all. And then the Baltimore Ravens in 2019, which was Lamar Jackson's run game. So we talked Lamar Jackson's MVP season, excuse me. We talked yesterday about like how might he overcome the lack of an elite running quarterback, but the track record for Greg Roman is that of somebody who's going to come in, and at minimum, this run game is going to be efficient. It's going to be explosive. It's going to be physical. So Tyler, what do you kind of expect from this run game and what Greg Roman's going to bring to the table there?
It's tough because we just talked yesterday about why they could underachieve, and we started with the 3 interior offensive linemen, and that's before we get into hopefully Joe Alt being healthy or not healthy, being good and translating to the next level. So that gives me pause there, but I genuinely believe that with this identity and with Gus Edwards, I think just the way they want to run, who they want to run with, how they want to run, the head coach. Again, I don't remember the last time the head coach and the offensive coordinator had like the exact same philosophies, same tendencies. And that's why you bring on Greg Roman, whether we liked it or not. That's why you bring him on. There's an alignment. They understand each other. They know exactly what buttons to press for what they need. So I think they will have a very solid rushing attack. I have to kind of look at maybe at the defenses ahead of them and just see how well they'll fare. But they have the running back now who was very, very efficient. I think top 5 in rushing yards ever expected or whatever it was under Greg Roman during his time with the Ravens when Greg Roman was the Ravens too. So I think Gus Edwards will be that guy. We'll see after that. Like Dobbins is a bit of a question mark. Kamani Vidal should be good. Should be a solid third guy. We don't officially know yet, but I think the floor will be much higher. I don't think they get to 240 yards in week 1 like last year, but they're also not going to have 30 yards a game and 1.2 yards per carry after that. I feel like this reminds me kind of like the offensive line of like 2020, 2019, where we were just kind of like fighting and clawing to like find some positivity with Trey Turner and Forrest Lamp and Dan Feeney and some of these guys like they were not so bad that time, So like with the rushing attack for the Chargers in the last few years, it's like, oh, they got like 3.5 yards per carry. And we were like, they should start Joshua Kelly over Austin Eckler. Like we're pointing at like 3.8 yards per carry versus like 1.6. Like it was just kind of like the lesser of two evils. Now with this rushing attack, I genuinely believe like they're going to just be great. The same way the offensive line of old was not good, but we tried to find something positive. Suddenly we saw Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater and went, oh, hold on. That's what it's supposed to look like. And I think that's what we're going to get this year with Greg Roman.
Yeah, I think, we sat at training camp last year and everything we heard was like, oh, like this running game is going to be downhill. It's going to be physical. It's going to fit everybody really well. And then Austin Eckler got hurt. And then Corey Linsley was out with the heart thing. And it was like they just kind of like forgot how to run the football. Like it was the most bizarre thing. Like it wasn't even just that the players were bad. Like you would watch one play and like the 5 linemen would block well, but the tight end would just like completely blow his assignment. And then you would watch the next one. It was like Jamari and the tight end would miss their assignments. And the next one, it would be like Zion and Trey would miss their assignments. It was never everybody was bad. It was just like one missed assignment on like every single run play. It was maddening to watch. And often it was the tight end group, but we'll see what Will Dissly can give this team, which is, I think, another reason for optimism is here. Yeah. But it's just the mentality and the attention to detail that I think was really missing last season. And I know that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are going to fix that because it's what they've done at every single turn. Do I expect them to be a number 1 rushing attack this year? Definitely not. There's too many question marks on the interior and at running back. And then the Justin Herbert is not as much of a runner. Mm-hmm. But if they can get to like 14th, just above average, that's a huge win for a team that needs to be able to close out games more often, needs to be able to take some pressure off of Justin Herbert in these close games. Just give me like 14th, 15th, and I'm really happy with that output in 2024. And then next year, maybe you go, fix your running back room with a, more expensive free agent or whatever. Maybe you go find your long-term answer at center. And then in 2025, you can get to like a top 5 rushing attack. Like, I think that's kind of the arc that I see this team going on is just give me above league average in 2024 and I'm cool with it. And then next year you fix some pieces and you go big or you go home in 2025 on the ground.
Yeah. And just looking at, we're talking about floors today. I was looking at 2021 while you were talking, the Ravens rushing attack in 2021. Give you $5 anyone in the chat if you can name me the 3 primary running backs for the Ravens in 2021. 3, 2, 1. So it was Devonta Freeman, Latavius Murray, and Tyson Williams. Yeah. And each of them still over averaged, individually over 4.2 yards per carry. And I think with this Chargers offense and the rushing attack, it's like, all right, we've got the one guy, and if he's hurt, we're doomed. I mean, the fact that Greg Roman could make it work with, respectfully, Devonta Freeman, Latavius Murray.
Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray in 2021.
In 2021, right. Not like when you were playing fantasy football in 2016 or whatever it was. It's been a minute, and he's still got those guys over 4.3, 4.2, 5.3 yards per carry. It's just the floor so much better here.
Yeah, and I do think the running back room is certainly not elite, but I think we all feel pretty good about Gus Edwards. We obviously really like Kamani Vidal. If J.K. Dobbins can be 75% of who he was before he got injured, then you're talking about a pretty good, certainly above average running back room, and I think that's enough. So just get me to 14th or 15th, and I'm happy. The opposite side of things, a lot of people have kind of harped on the passing attack under Greg Roman and what kind of has happened there. But if you really look at the Ravens timeline, the Ravens tenure across 4 seasons, they ranked 2nd in EPA per dropback and 10th in success rate. The 49ers, for what it's worth, in the same categories ranked 19th and 5th. Obviously, they had Colin Kaepernick for the bulk of that, who's not nearly as good of a passer as Lamar Jackson has been. And again, you never know who to give credit 100% of the way to, but I think it's pretty notable that the Ravens were 2nd in EPA per dropback under Greg Roman across 4 seasons. Like, that's very difficult to do. And I think the thing that people will like about this offense is that Lamar Jackson ranked in the top 10 in average depth of target every single season under Greg Roman. They're going to push the ball downfield. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be, deep play action concepts. It's going to be yards after the catch opportunities. It's going to look very different than what we were used to under Joe Lombardi. Probably more leaning Kellen Moore in terms of his passing concepts that we liked last year, for what it's worth. So this passing attack, I think, is we've gone too far the other way with Greg Roman passing offense is basically my take here. Is like people talk about him like the Ravens were like 28th in passing under him, when in fact they were one of the best, 4 or 5 passing offenses in the league across 4 different seasons.
Yeah, I don't think Greg Roman is a bad passing game coordinator type and play caller and such. There was just some okay, if you go get Ben Johnson, I think you're more leaning in towards both a better passing attack and B, maybe a more modern one, but it still works with Greg Roman. The question is more so like, as you pointed out yesterday, beyond the bones or after year one, what's next? But I think that Justin Herbert answers some of those questions for you. Like, I believe that whatever the floor is for this team that Greg Roman provides, whatever that structure is, Justin Herbert will figure out the rest. Ladd McConkey, Josh Palmer, whoever, I think they can help figure out some of the rest. So do I think they'll be second in EPA per dropback and 10th in success rate this year? No, but I'm not like putting it past Justin Herbert to do that either.
Yeah.
We'll see. I do believe that the efficiency will be up. And the good news is, even if you think the kind of got to work some things out, maybe it is similar to Kellen Moore. They got to work out the passing game. They got to work out the passing game fine. At least you have an offensive line. At least you have the run game that we think is going to be good to at least elevate this team.
Yeah, and to be fair, like we talked about yesterday, the Ravens had Mark Andrews, which was a huge advantage for them. The Chargers do not have that kind of player. So again, like I think if you are looking at like the optimistic side of the offense of what you're potentially getting, maybe a top 15 run game, maybe the passing offense is like 12th. Well, if you're 15th and 12th, that's a consensus top 12 offense. And I think if you're the Chargers, you're stoked about that outcome in the first year of the new regime. So, and then you have Justin Herbert to potentially push that ceiling even further. So again, talking about reasons why you could overachieve, I think Greg Roman really raises the floor of this offense. And like, yeah, you have some question marks about passing scheme and things like that, but that's why you hire smart people like Marcus Brady and Shane Day, who know what they're doing in terms of the passing game, who have a good relationship with Justin Herbert. You put other people around Greg Roman to overcome his weaknesses, and obviously Justin Herbert can do that as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, switching sides to the defense here. There's no real like EPA per play and success rate in defense that's like super reliable. So this is more like volume stats, but I wanted to hit on a few key things here in terms of like how you can really tell if a defense is good, and specifically in college football. Obviously you have points per game on here. But really the 3 things that I think really determine in college football is the defense great or not are opponent red zone scores per game, yards per play, and then first downs allowed on third downs, because it's so difficult to get off the field in those kind of situations. In college, there's so much space. Every team has 6 good receivers. College defenses are kind of not meant to get off the field in these kind of situations. But if you look at what Jesse Minter did at Michigan, and obviously, the talent is the talent, but they were 1st and 7th in opponent red zone scores over the last 2 years. They were 3rd and 5th in yards per play allowed over the last 2 years. They gave up a first down on third down 29% of the time, which was 6th in 2023, which is insane. The one blemish on Jesse Minter's Michigan record is that he ranked 22nd in first downs allowed on third down in 2023. How dare you rank 22nd, Jesse Minter? Everything else, regardless of like the category, is like top 10 across the board. It's insane to look at what he was able to do. But those 3 things in college football, I think, are the most important stats to highlight. And Michigan was outstanding in every single one.
What I'm so impressed with Michigan and Jesse Minter is that they're doing this on defense with not the best players. And Brandon Staley's big knock, and even more so at the time, maybe even more so now, was that he was maybe elevated by Aaron Donald, by Jalen Ramsey, by the talent that the Rams put up. And so everything was easy for him. And then, of course, he goes to the Chargers. There's injuries. There's no Aaron Donald. There's no Jalen Ramsey. Whoops, I'm not a good defensive coordinator. Jesse Minter, yes, it's at the college level, but it's not like those guys at Michigan or the all-world, 17 different, players at Georgia who could go in the first or second rounds like we saw. How often do we watch Georgia and it's like, here's this guy can go in the first round. There's 20 more of them. With Michigan, we watch a lot of these guys on defense, but it's not like they were all going to go in the first round or second round or third round. I mean, I loved watching Josh Wallace play. Junior Colson just went in the third round. Some of these guys, like, they're not the greatest talent, but Jesse Minter got the best defense possible with not a lot. Not that these guys are bad. Again, Michigan has talented players, but there's a tier difference. So just maximizing those players. I feel that while we haven't seen Minter call plays in the NFL, I just believe that, especially with Harbaugh as the coach, with the meshing of philosophies and like understanding each other, understanding how things work, leaning on John Harbaugh and McDonald and some contacts and like how are things working, that kind of communication and learning, watching people I just think this defense is going to be so much more elevated because Minter is he got the best defense in college football with lesser players. Okay, here's these 4 edge rushers. It's like what? This guy's been winning laps, winning races, NASCAR in a Prius. Now you're handing him a Ferrari, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, let's do this. So I just think if you can take a not as optimal defensive group, make them the best defense in college, now you're getting this group. Granted, the DBs are not, 100% perfect, but there's been no Derwin James, there's been no Khalil Mack, there's been no Thule, et cetera, with Jesse Minter. So I just believe the floor is so much higher because he's done so much with not as much.
Yeah, I think, we've kind of heard the emphasis for Jesse Minter in 2024, and that is to get the scheme to a point that will allow everybody to feel like they can play fast. And that was a real issue under Brandon Staley, where like we heard throughout the entire season, and especially at the end of the season, where the defensive backs were having to think so much about like, okay, this means this and that means that, and if he does this, I have to do this, and if Derwin changes here, I have to do this. Like everything was so complicated. Derwin James is playing 8 positions out there on the field on any given week, and Denzel Perryman comes to the podium yesterday and just says like, yeah, it feels natural to me coming over from the Gus Bradley, D'Amico Ryans kind of scheme where we just want to communicate pre-snap and get everybody on the same page to play fast. And I think that is so important in how you raise the floor of a defense. Is let's just all these margin for error things that we can have as a scheme, we're just going to throw it out the way. We're going to make it simple. We're going to play ball. We're going to let our edge rushers do work. We're going to let Morgan Fox get after it. And we're just going to protect ourselves against explosive plays, and everybody's going to fly around. I think just even that like mentality is so important to raise the floor of a defense. And yeah, you don't have a great secondary. Okay, let's overcome that with some great pass rush and just the right mentality to have. So I cannot wait to see what Jesse Minter does this year. But next year, man, like when they have resources and can go get a real impact into your defensive lineman, a real impact safety to go alongside these guys, an impact corner maybe in the first round, like, man, 2025 is going to be a lot of fun. But this year, a lot of the best defenses that are most fun to watch are just kind of like a hodgepodge groups that exceed expectations. And I think that this Chargers defense has that recipe under Jesse Minter in the first year.
Yeah, I definitely, not to bring the negativity back into it, we heard this a lot last year with Kellen Moore. Hey, we're going to run 3 or 4 concepts. We're going to simplify anything, and we're just going to run them really, really well. I don't think that necessarily means that they were ever complicated, but it never quite worked out in the end. Sure. But again, it goes back to, and we'll talk about him, it goes back to Jim Harbaugh. I just think the oversight here, okay, we have these philosophies. Like, I think that's actually we're going to see them actually be a thing and be effective rather than just kind of lip service, because it's the off season, lip service, hype talk, whatever. But like, it's actually going to happen. Maybe not instantly, but it is a process that's going to happen. That's why they could overachieve.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the next one here. Yesterday, we hinted on the schedule. Today, we're taking a different approach to the schedule. So, Tyler, why don't you go over this slide here?
Easy one. Their opponents suck for the most part. Outside of a few teams, the Chargers opponents, they were a bad team last year, so they get an easy schedule. They get the last place schedule. They are 12 games on their schedule against teams who had less than 10 wins in 2024. According to the 2023 records, they're the 27th ranked easiest schedule by strength of schedule, 31st easiest by projected opponent win totals. And the good news with the schedule is they host most of their toughest opponents at home. So obviously they'll play Kansas City once at home. Then they play the Bengals at home, the Ravens at home, the Bucs at home. Those are some potentially tough games. They're going to be tough games. Baltimore, I think they'll lose. But instead of having to travel to Tampa Bay, travel to Cincinnati, travel to Baltimore, like they get to go get these guys at home. and they travel to, we talked about like some of the season schedule earlier. Well, like they have to go to like at Carolina, at Atlanta, or is that at home?
It's at Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah, like you feel a bit better about that. You get these difficult ones at home, so that helps. And then you have 9 different games where opponents have either a new quarterback and or a new head coach. So a lot of turnover there. Yes, the Chargers also have a new head coach, but it's different. This new head coach is an old head coach with plenty of experience, and they certainly don't have a new quarterback. So I just think that gives you an edge whether you catch these teams early or later on, you get them at home. The schedule really does favor the Chargers overall. Yes, there are some things that don't favor the Chargers. Not everything can go your way. But for lack of any other better way to say it, these opponents are not great. Last year's schedule was tough. This year, just looking at it now, May 21st, it doesn't seem so tough.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is like all throughout last season, it was like, man, that schedule can get tough. This year, like you feel great about it, in terms of like, the favorable stretches, which we talked about, the ability to have these games at home against the tough opponents. It's just a big winning edge, I think, for them in the right time. Like obviously you would kind of like to have this team be ready to contend and have this kind of schedule. But the fact that they're not and they have this schedule gives them a lot of leeway to exceed expectations. So I do think this is a real thing for them, whether you're looking at strength of schedule by previous records or future win totals. However you slice it, it's an easier schedule than the Chargers have had in quite some time. And they have a team that could potentially be playoff ready. So, the teams change year to year and things like that. But, projected win totals from Las Vegas are generally pretty accurate. And so you look at, the projected win totals of 133 being 31st, like the Chargers play a favorable schedule. Maybe not easy. Maybe that's the wrong word for strength of schedule, but it's favorable to them this year because of the opponents that they have to face.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're not going to talk about neck flexion next. The Chargers are certainly due some positive regression from an injury standpoint in 2024. Looking back at all of the games missed, all the injuries, it was kind of crazy to type out, and you kind of just like miss about it. It's insane. Obviously, Justin Herbert missed the final 4 games of the season. He broke his finger, both of his fingers last season. Wide receivers 1 through 3 missed a combined 25 games last season. So even if you think the Chargers wide receiver room this year is not as talented as last year's, they're probably going to be healthier. Austin Eckler missed 4 games. I think Joshua Kelly was bruised up a little bit. Corey Linsley obviously missed 14 games. Will Clapp missed 4 games, the backup center. Your edge 2, Joey Bosa, missed 9 games. Your safety 2 missed 3 games. Your edge 4, Chris Rumpf, missed 11. You had the whole JC Jackson situation at corner. And then you had other bumps and bruises too. Like I mentioned, Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater played through 2 different high ankle sprains. Trey Pipkins was banged up. Zion Johnson missed some games. Michael Davis missed some games. Derwin missed a couple games, et cetera, et cetera. We could keep going on. It was a tough year for injuries, man. So just even if they had just brought back the same exact regime, all of the same players, they would be due for some positive injury regression. And now you also add in the Ben Herbert factor, and that really is where I think you could potentially be in for a much healthier season in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, heck, the Chargers, so they win 5 games last year. What do they win if they're completely healthy? Now, sure, every team would love to say that, but I mean, this team could do some damage. I mean, we saw week 3 what this offense could do, and then guys got hurt and everything went off the rails. If that week 3 offense was even there for 10 more games, not even for the rest of the season, but just 10 more games, team wins a lot more games. And of course, lots of what ifs. We're hoping for health, and that's kind of a dangerous thing to be assuming they'll overachieve because of some regression, positive regression in terms of health. But yeah, Ben Herbert, we believe in. I think that he's going to do what it takes, and he's going to get the Chargers to do what it takes to be their healthiest versions of themselves. I think the new practice facility is going to help tremendously. I think that could even just be included in here, having the brand new, Jim Harbaugh vacuumed new practice facility, best fields, hopefully better food, stuff like that. I think that there's going to be, I just think there's so many little things that'll add up. Defense was hit pretty bad last year. there was just a point last year. Yes, Herbert was out there with a broken finger, but then it was like, I forget if it was the Lions game or maybe a different game where it was like, okay, Gerald Everett's out or hurt. Parham is out or hurt. Lindsley's out. Slater's got 2 high ankle sprains. Eckler's not himself. Maybe Kelly was out. Pipkins was hurt. Gerald Everett wasn't out there. Keenan Allen was barely out there. Mike Williams wasn't out there. Josh Palmer had a concussion. It was like, what is happening? And the same thing like in 2022 or 2020. Yeah, 2022, end of the season. All right, we're going to throw it to DeAndre Carter. We're going to throw it to the previous season.
Michael Bandy.
Yeah, Michael Bandy. The previous season, everyone's gassed. What do? We got to throw it to Andre Roberts, and they wouldn't even do that. Like, I'm just hoping for something more positive here. Arjun's got the big eyes in the chat. I hope there's nothing new that just happened, but yeah, it was a rough season last year, and it has been for many seasons for the Chargers in terms of injuries. And I'm hoping that just any kind of return to form. I don't know honestly how much like the 8.5. Not that Rashawn Slater gives you 2 more games, but like I don't know how much Vegas is maybe considering that Rashawn Slater. Yes, he played those games, but like, does it factor in the fact that he had 2 high ankle sprains, which is sort of public knowledge, but it's just a thing that Duke Manyweather said, So yeah, neck flexion. I don't literally mean that'll fix the team, but I do believe that they will be better.
Yeah. First of all, hello, Arjun. Hopefully you're enjoying Portugal, one of my favorite places to visit in Europe. Looks like he's enjoying some surfing and things like that. So shout out to Arjun, man. Appreciate him as always. What was I going to say? Shoot, I had a good point, and then Arjun distracted me. Damn it. Okay, I guess I'll answer this question, then it'll probably come back to me. Caden Smith, probably a stupid question, but what does WAR stand for? So WAR, we have obviously in the graphic here to the right. WAR stands for wins above replacement, which basically is PFF's way to measure how effective your starter is compared to their replacement across the board in terms of position. So Chargers lost a lot to backups, basically, is kind of what this is saying. So it's the Chargers should be in a much better spot here. And again, even if Justin Herbert stays healthy and then everything else below that is the same, like you feel better about the season, right? Because Justin Herbert just means that much and not playing with 2 broken fingers. But we'll see how it goes. Oh, I remember now. Did you see who's in charge of like the food in the new facility, by the way?
No. Is it Canes? No, I'm kidding.
No, it's Wolfgang Puck.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. So you want to talk about an upgrade, man? You go from the Chargers' previous like F-rated food. I don't know what's this food catering, I guess. To the Chargers to Wolfgang Puck is going to be running things.
Wow,
it's kind of crazy. So
yeah,
Jim Harbaugh went big for the food at the new facility.
Yeah, well, geez, spared no expense. I believe it. That's pretty good there. I mean, Gerald Everett's one of the toughest guys you've ever seen on the field, and he couldn't handle the food the Chargers were eating, like the burgers or whatever it was. Like that guy will chew glass and chew steel. He couldn't even eat the food at their previous facility. So Wolfgang Puck, that's a heck of an upgrade.
Yeah, quality of life for the Chargers there has been upgraded for sure. All right, next one here and final one, I believe. Yes. Just the Jim Harbaugh factor. You don't mess around with Jim. This is obviously a much younger picture of him from the 49ers days, but we all have seen the games, right? But, the Chargers under Jim Harbaugh, we believe are going to improve by flipping the script in close game and late game situations. In 2023, the Chargers lost 8 games by 7 points or less. Again, that is one single possession games. You're talking about 8 losses. In 2023, the losses in the fourth quarter / overtime after leading or tying in the fourth quarter was 6. So you're talking about a lot of blown leads by the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh with the 49ers was 28-1 in 1-score games with the 49ers. It was a real strength of his. It's been a real strength of his at Michigan as well. And then speaking of the Vegas win total, Jim Harbaugh has exceeded the predicted Vegas win totals 8 of the last 13 seasons. I couldn't find anything going back to like Stanford, but I can't imagine the win totals for Stanford were super high, and they definitely exceeded expectations. The Chargers have not done that since 2018. which I found out to be the longest drought in the NFL, which is super fun to type out. So you're talking about exceeding expectations. You're talking about 1-score games. These are all real strengths of Jim Harbaugh, and it's been real weaknesses of the Chargers over the last 5-6 years.
That's a great stat. I don't know why 2018 sounds like it's 2 years ago. It's not. That's been a minute. 2024. So I'm approaching 30. Here we go.
Yep.
Yeah, the Chargers with the longest drought of not exceeding their win totals. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I know Arjun pointed that out for the Chargers under Brandon Staley. I didn't realize it had extended previously. Although I guess that makes sense considering
their 2019 line. Do you remember what it was?
What was it, like 11 and a half or something?
It was 10 and a half. And then they won 5 games. It was really bad, man. Everybody was buying the Chargers hype in 2019 after the 2018 season. And, it did not go well.
I get it. Yeah, that was a bummer. Anyway, new year, new team, new me, and all that sort of stuff. Yes, this is ultimately, not ultimately, but when it comes down to it, why do you hire Jim Harbaugh? To win, and to win in the games where you didn't win before. And I just think the Chargers, other than 2018, where there was a bit of luck, but they also were kind of aggressive and just worked, they just turtle under Brandon Staley outside of the first 7 weeks of the awesome 2021 season where we were super hyped about how things would go and they'd win against the Browns and all those great games. They just kind of turtled. And I think I started to keep track of the number of times they had lost these 1-score games or in the fourth quarter and overtime under Brandon Staley. I think with Anthony Lynn, it was maybe 6, 7, 8 games in the 4 years. With Brandon Staley in the 2.75 years, it was like 20 games. I mean, it was just a disgusting display. And it showed in the postseason. It showed in several different games, in games last year. And look, they only lost 6 games in 2023 in the fourth quarter overtime. They're also just like flat out blown out in other games. So I guess they didn't blow the game in the fourth quarter because they were down, 40 points heading into that quarter. So I just think Jim Harbaugh flips everything for the Chargers. And I think that obviously the win total, the line at 8.5, bakes a lot of this Jim Harbaugh into it. So it's not like Vegas is like, oh, I don't know about Jim Harbaugh. Like the Chargers are at 8.5 kind of because of Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. That's already in there. But I just think if you're trying to exceed and go from, 8, not hitting the 8, or not, sorry, underachieving, hitting 8 versus overachieving and getting 9, that's Jim Harbaugh. That's why you hire him. And then that's why you pay Wolfgang Puck.
Wolfgang Puck and Ben Herbert, man. Wow, what a combination. I think we talked about this, a little bit on the record prediction show, but I think if you just took this exact roster and put Brandon Staley in for Jim Harbaugh, for example, I think the Vegas win total would probably be at 6.5. I think Jim Harbaugh is getting 2 games of value, which is a lot. If you took out Jim Harbaugh and you took out Justin Herbert, I think you're talking about like a 4-win team. Like the roster around them, outside of like what we've talked about, the tackles, the edge rushers, and some other positions that are like fine. The roster is just not in a position ready to contend. But because you have Justin and Jim and Joe Ortiz as well, who's done a lot of really smart things, it gives an ability to raise the floor across the board. And you might have some question marks into your defensive line, at corner, into your offensive line, running back, receiver, tight end. But you trust this coaching staff to maximize the talent. You trust the coaching staff to have real identities and have real substance about their strategies and game plans and style of play, that you just raise the floor. So, I think it's pretty safe to say that we do expect them to exceed expectations of the Vegas win total. It'd be interesting to see how much exactly that is. Is that 9-8? Is that 10-7? Remains to be seen, obviously. But I think we took some heat yesterday for doing the underachieve video. But it's pretty clear if you're watching this video that we do expect to see this team exceed expectations and win a lot of football games in 2024.
Yeah, I love this stat from Fitness. I'll have to figure out where this is from. But Jim Harbaugh has 19 comeback wins. I'm assuming that's the NFL. Justin Herbert has 11. Hopefully Herbert won't get any more comeback wins. Yeah, the narrative around comeback wins, hopefully Herbert gets a few of those. But yes, it would be nice for the Chargers just to flat out win these games and win early and not need to come back and win because, yes, Herbert's been on the wrong side of that too many times.
Yeah, we talked yesterday about like, well, what happens if they're in a shootout? Well, that's why you have Justin Herbert, right? You know, Justin Herbert can maximize these offensive weapons, and we'll see what happens. So I can't wait to watch this team play. I think these kind of seasons where you're not really expecting a ton are kind of the ones where you end up being the most surprised. You have the most fun, and you learn to love a lot of these players. And obviously, you know, we did a ton of draft homework the last couple of years, so we know a lot of these players pretty well in terms of like who they are, what they're capable of. That's certainly part of it. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the season. I'm certainly not expecting them to like get the 1 seed and like beat the Chiefs for the first time in 8 years or whatever it is. But I just think this team can be fun. I think they can be scrappy. I think they can make life hell on a lot of these other teams. And, you know, maybe Justin Herbert gives you a couple extra games and maybe you can get to 11 and get a 5 seed and just kind of go from there. So we are definitely more positive than yesterday's show painted us out to be. If you just watched the first 5 minutes of the episode. But we wanted to do the yin and yang. I think that's something that we do really well on this show, is talking about all the different scenarios and not just being one way or the other. So yesterday you get a little bit maybe more negative, and today you get all the positive.
Yeah, yin and yang are my cousins, and I hope that the Chargers. I hope that you mentioned a pleasant surprise and not expecting a ton. Like, I really hope that the Chargers are like the X-Men '97 of football teams this year, where like, yeah, I think it's probably good. I'll check it out. Oh wow, much better than expected. It almost feels like, and it sucks because these players have to go out there and fight for their jobs and compete, and their bodies are on the line. But for us as fans, it just feels like playing with house money. It's just like, yeah, if they're not good, if they're just average, all right. You know, I didn't expect a ton, but if they're even better and they exceed their win totals, we're having some fun. So it's just kind of a fun season ahead of us. It doesn't feel like there's as much stakes. Obviously, Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, they said they want to win. They want to win every year, and I think they will. But I don't have a ton of expectations of like, yeah, this is a contender for the Super Bowl or anything. I hope it's a good one. As long as they're at least just stay healthy.
Yeah, stay healthy, be competitive, and honestly, I'm happy. You know, if this team is 9-8, okay, first year of the rebuild and they won 9 games, I'll take that. Next season is the big push that I think people should be. That's when you want to see the team make Super Bowl conversations legitimate. So, yeah, man, I think this was a good balancing act of episodes over the past couple of days. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Tyler and I are not going to be back here together live until next Tuesday. It's Memorial Day weekend, and I'm going to spend some time with my parents who are coming into town. So we'll be back next week. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out?
Do I have any final thoughts? One of you said you were watching Dune 2. Have fun. That's my final thought.
Yeah. There's been that trend of like, post a great movie scene or whatever. Have you seen those? Mm-hmm. And I've seen a ton of Dune clips because of it. And yeah, I did not like the first Dune, but the second part 2 was fantastic. It was a great one.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Hopefully you can like and comment here on the video as well as subscribe. And that does really help continue to grow the show. This has been the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up.